Well, good morning. Here we are in Winchester Broadway once again. It's May Day, 1st of May, the bank holiday. Behind me there are runners drifting through, well, racing through the Broadway, but we're soon going to be taking it over with the King Alfred buses. The first one will be here in the Broadway in a few minutes, and then it will be a sea of green and of course a whole lot of other colours, as we have a number of visiting buses as well, for the rest of the day. And we're hoping that the weather will hold. It's okay so far. There's been a few buses drop out in the usual way, no King Alfred ones as yet. Hopefully all around the area there are people converging on the Broadway, hoping to have a great day. Let's see what happens. It's wonderful that you're here tonight. Thank you so much for coming. It's a very extraordinary evening, isn't it? 28th of April, 1973. 50 whole years ago, this was the last night of the King Alfred motor services. Tonight, we thought we could not let this anniversary go by without noting it. We are delighted that the very last bus was the Panther, and the driver of that last bus was Richard Chisnell. He's here tonight. He's going to receive the last ticket again. 50 years to the day.
Am I not driving?
And so say all of us. Here we are. This is Winchester Broadway, and I'm standing behind our newly acquired 1929 Leyland Lion. And we're incredibly proud of this vehicle, which isn't actually a King Alfred bus. It started life with Hanson Dorset in Poole. King Alfred had two vehicles which were absolutely the same. And when this vehicle became available, it had been restored in Scotland by a father and son team who had taken it from really a pile of bits to being the fantastic vehicle that you see behind me now. They put their life and soul into it over about 20 years. Ross was the son. His father died a couple of years ago, and Ross decided that was the time to move this vehicle on and was looking for a home for it. And of course, because it comes from the Hanson Dorset land, he was hoping that it might be able to come south. We looked at it, we realised that it was an absolute carbon copy of the King Alfred vehicles, OT 8608 and 8609, delivered to Robert Chisnell in the very end of 1928. We thought this would be a wonderful opportunity to recapture that type of vehicle, which was one of the first really modern vehicles to enter the fleet of King Alfred Motor Services. We went ahead and were successful in getting the bus. When we bought it back at the turn of the year, 2022, it was painted in the livery of Edinburgh City Transport. It was a beautiful red and white, all gloriously lined out, looked absolutely a picture, but of course not for our purposes. We've had it repainted. This work was done by a skilled team at the Scottish Vintage Bus Museum where it had been housed, and they've done a wonderful job with it, absolutely amazing. And it is in the pre-war King Alfred colours, which are subtly different from the post-war, particularly the cream. If we look at the colours on the vehicle, the lower part is what we call mid-Brunswick green. That is a standard colour that we still use today for the lower half of the King Alfred buses. And then you have light Brunswick green above it, a line of that. That's what we use for the upper parts of the later buses. And then the colour above that is ivory. Not cream, but ivory, a lighter shade. And that's the difference really. It makes it look quite a lot different. And in this case, typical of 1920s vehicles, it has a canvas roof and that has a white-based colouring on it. The colour scheme is absolutely authentic as far as we can establish, and it looks just like the photograph. We have one photograph taken by Charles Clapper which shows one of the King Alfred Lions standing in the Broadway on the other side of the street from where we are now, way back in 1929, when one of these lions every day went to London, leaving the Broadway at 8:30 in the morning, travelling 4.5 hours to Charing Cross, depositing its passengers somewhere around about 1 o'clock, and then coming back after 6. A long day for the driver and the passengers, but these lions proved themselves quite competent at making that journey, notwithstanding the fact that this vehicle is designed for a maximum speed of 20 miles an hour. So it's surprising what you could do if you put your mind to it. working life out of the Poole depot of Hanston Dorset was 1929 to 1939 roughly, and then in the war it became an ARP, Air Raid Precaution Service vehicle, and was kept in Poole for that purpose. After the war it was bought by an elderly retired engineer and his wife, and they converted it into a caravan. What they did was to turn it into a living van. It had a great big box on the top in which they kept stuff, and it towed a trailer its own length, would you believe? And they travelled up and down the south of England, generally going to shows, for about 10 years. And then the vehicle was made to be static. So they arrived in a village in Devon and they parked the vehicle, and it stood there with them living in it for another 10 years, till the mid-1960s, 67 in fact. And then they had become too elderly really to get in and out of it, I think. And so they had to move into an elderly person's home, and the bus was friendless for a bit until it was rescued by Winkley Transport Collection, by Colin Shears in fact, and taken to Winkley while a home was found for it. And a home was indeed found for it, in that a business based in Peterborough, so on the eastern side of England, realised that this would be a wonderful thing to turn into effectively a lorry, really, a van to take their business commodities around. And they were called the Complete Automobilist, and what they did was to service vintage vehicle parts. It was all dolled up by them, presented, and indeed I saw it myself at the 1970 London to Brighton Rally in May 1970, painted cream. But it wasn't really a practical proposition. It was a very old vehicle, so they passed it on, and it spent some time at the Leyland Museum in Lancashire, but wasn't part of their collection. In the end, it was spotted and rescued by a key member of the Scottish Vintage Bus Museum at Louthalmond in the Kingdom of Fife in Scotland, and it was transported north. The task of fixing it was taken up by this father and son team, Dougie and Ross Schoolar. They really started about 2003, completely reconstructing the vehicle, took it right back to the ground, built it up again, and what you see now is therefore a combination of several Leyland Lions, quite a lot of new stuff, all put together so that you can see what it would have been like. The whole idea of this is that you can ride in this, you can hear it, you can smell it, you can sense what it was like to ride about. In its day, was a revolutionary piece of kit. We're delighted to have this in our fleet. We think it will be a real flagship. We have recently been commissioned one of our suppliers to provide sign writing on this vehicle. Wording on the back here is gold leaf, etched in black, all applied by hand. These are not transfers, this is painted on. Look how fine that is. King Alfred, Winchester, and the phone number 68. It became 3868 later on. That is the picture. And if you look at the number plate, you'll see that it's not a plate, it's literally written straight onto the glass. And the way that that works is that when it's at night, that is illuminated by the lights inside the vehicle. And if we look on the side of the bus, we can see that it has a King Alfred statue. Whereas we use a transfer for the more modern vehicles, these were all sign written, and indeed they were painted on, each one individually, and that's what's happening here. So our sign writer is in process with this. It's not finished yet. You can see that the lower part has been more or less completed, but this is gold leaf, on which, if you look very carefully, he's etched in all the detail, and very fine detail, and then that will be painted out to provide a really stunning representation of the King Alfred statue, and the same on the other side. It's a big job, and there's several more days' work, of painstaking hand-done work to make that finish. And the other thing we see is a gold line. This is the lining out, as it's called, and that's gold leaf again. Doesn't it set the bus off? You can see that a great deal of time and trouble has been spent on restoring this, which had started, I mean, it survived for a number of reasons of fate, if you like.
Try to get a ride on it.
here we are around the front of our Leyland Lion, and let's have a look at some of the things we can see. Well, number one, here's the number plate. This is not the original plate, would have been painted when delivered. Below it is the starting handle. I'm delighted to tell you that one of the things that has been retrofitted to this vehicle is an electric starter. So we do not have to swing it to get it to start, which is something of a benefit because it's hard work. But all the buses in the pre-war period in Winchester and across the country, really, it was common for them not to have an electric starter, and they had to be swung to start every time. You can imagine stalling it at the high street traffic lights and having to get out of the cab and turn the handle, and it's no joke, you know. This is a serious piece of kit. Headlights, well, when this vehicle was operating as a caravan, it had no headlights. Didn't need an MOT, there was no such thing. They never ran it at night, so they just didn't have lights on it. But obviously we can't do that nowadays, and it would have had lights to begin with. So you see, these are beautiful replicas, in themselves extremely expensive bits of kit. The iconic radiator is a real feature of this. It's a typical Leyland product of its time. It has this rather fine badge in it, by appointment to His Majesty the King, Leyland Motors Limited. So they provided vehicles for the royal family at the time. This is a fine piece, and as you can see, it's polished up quite nicely. It's aluminium. There's a step there, and that is to allow you to step up, and you can see the handle at the top and change the destination. So the conductor would have been expected to do that. Over here, it has side lights, one on the left and one here on the right. And this here is a ventilator to let some much needed, I have to say, fresh air into the lower part of the cab, so that's quite good. Now this here is the horn, and I'm just going to open the cab door and toot the horn, and you'll hear that it's quite an amusing. You'd think it was useless, but actually it's quite fun. The windscreen opens. All British buses had to have an opening windscreen until the 1950s, the end of the 50s. And if you look carefully, you can see the tyres. These are very special tyres, very difficult to get tyres that fit this. These were made in America and imported. Each one of them an expensive piece of kit in its own right. The tyres are not cheap anyway, but these are super expensive, so we want to be really careful with them, but they look the part. One of the features that you can see, which is quite normal today, but this vehicle is fitted with mirrors for the driver to use, one on the offside, one on the near side. When this bus went into service, and all through its operational life before the war, it wouldn't have had a near side mirror. They just didn't use them, didn't require them, didn't know they needed them. And now, of course, we couldn't possibly think of driving a bus without a near side mirror and not able to watch the entrance door and all the rest of it.
Thank you very much.
Now, the first issue with the cab is getting into it, as you can imagine. So it's not a straightforward thing, left foot onto there, and then the problem is what to do with your right foot. It goes up to there, yes, okay, but then, and then I'm in. And now you can see that the cab is incredibly peculiar really in the way that it's managed. Come and see what's happening down at the pedals. The thing that strikes you about a pre-war vehicle like this is that the throttle, like our Dennis and our Albion, is in the middle. That's the brake, that's the throttle, and that's the clutch. So we need the clutch for the gears, and here is the gear lever. And you can see that when the bus is in second gear, it's really very close to the middle of your legs. Not particularly convenient, but there you are. We have a handbrake, and the action of this handbrake is the opposite of our rest of our fleet. To apply it, we are pushing it away. Normally you'd pull it that way, but there you are. Now, steering wheel, and we have a throttle, a hand throttle, and we have an advance and retard as well, which advances the spark or retards it. And a driver has to be more confident and know what to do more than a more modern vehicle. It's interesting to look at the notices around this bus. Down here there's a sign that says use foot brake for service, handbrake for parking, and the reason for that is that until this type of vehicle, the more normal way to deal with this was handbrake to be the service brake. But on this vehicle the handbrake acts on the drive shaft, whereas the foot brake acts on the wheels. So this is the correct way now to drive the vehicle. Much more convenient, and four-wheel brakes as well, so more likely to pull up. The seat is very basic, and it has no adjustments. Modern bus seats go up and down, they move forwards and backwards and different angles and different backs and so on. This has none of that. It is here or not. And in fact you can see that it folds. You can fold the seat up to give you a bit more room to get in, but I must say that I find that's not particularly useful. Closed, and that's the cab. If we look round a little bit to the near side of it, here we have obviously access to the engine, and this is a thing called the auto vac, and this contains the fuel and then it gets dripped down into the engine. But remember, the fuel is petrol. Underneath the bonnet we have a 4-cylinder overhead valve engine, powerful but slow, and it's very slow on hills. Here we are at the entrance, and of course that's where modern users would see a difference. This is not low floor, easy access. This is anything but really, and getting off even more so because of the way the steps are designed. So when you get up, easy enough, but coming off, you have to put your foot right into the well, otherwise you tend to slip off it. But at least it has a door, and not every pre-war vehicle would have been fitted with a door, especially in London, where the Metropolitan Police didn't like doors, but definitely improved the temperature for passengers using it. Come aboard! Indoors in the Leyland Lion, and the first thing that strikes you is the hooped roof, made of tongue and groove woodwork, and these hoops holding it all together. So wood is the overwhelming part of this. The inside has been subjected to a most amazing restoration. Everything about it is newly done. It doesn't look bad at all. You could be forgiven for thinking that you were in a new vehicle, except for the fact that of course the specification is somewhat older. The design It carries 33 people, so it's quite a serious number of passengers. Seats face forward for the first 4 rows, and then over the rear wheels, as is characteristic, we've got seats that face inwards, and at the back 2 more rows. It's got everything working, the windows open, drop down. It has these rather nice light fittings. Here are luggage racks. Now these have been a big problem, and you'll see that in fact one luggage rack is missing its net because it hasn't been possible to find a net to fulfill that particular requirement. If it's very hot, you can open the roof. There you are. So that gives you a bit of ventilation as the bus is going along. It's pretty good, really. Here we are at the end of our running day, May the 1st, 2023, and what a day it's been actually. A little bit of rain in the middle just to dampen our ardour for a few happy minutes, but the rest of the time it's been absolutely wonderful. We've seen people coming from all across the country to take a ride on the Lion, of course, but on all our other vehicles. So we've had 13 King Alfred vehicles in operation today and something like 25 visiting buses giving rides, and it's clear that we've had one of the busiest running days for many years. That's a real great thing for us because it's all about getting people to come and actually experience our buses. Overall, very pleased with everything. We'd like to take the opportunity of thanking everybody who's been involved in making the running day work, because this is our hobby after all, and we want it to be fun for the people who've done all the work in preparing the event, but also fun for all of you who come and support us. Lots of people have done that. We're really, really delighted and pleased that you've come if you've come, and if you haven't, why not come next time? Thank you for coming, thank you for being part of this, thank you for watching.